The film begins in the dark alleys of a city where crime and despair hang in the air. The action leads us to the outskirts of a bar whose lights go out after some devastating gunshots. 4 days before these events, we meet Adam, a middle-aged man who has decided to return to the neighborhood where he grew up. Upon arriving, Adam faces a problem. His old friend Steve has given his room to someone else, despite having reached an agreement. Thus, the protagonist is forced to settle in the building's basement. Although it is not very pleasant, it is better than sleeping on the street. Switching scenes, Anna, a woman worn down by grief, begins her day with the shocking news that the man who killed her son has completed his probation period. Her other son, Eli, reminds her that there is nothing they can do about it, even though she cannot help but feel a deep sense of powerlessness. Back with Adam, he appears before Officer Patricia to talk about his progress just 1 day before his probation ends. Yet something does not add up. Patricia finds it suspicious that Adam has returned to his old neighborhood so close to the end of his probation. He insists that he has secured a job at a bar and that things are going well. Elsewhere in the city, Mike, an introverted young man, buys a few guns from drug traffickers, not for himself, but for his uncle Lev, an arrogant man who is supposedly running an auto repair shop. The two later meet with Yamal, a drug trafficker who offers a wide variety of products. He is soon expecting a shipment of heroin, which catches Mike's interest, although his uncle warns him that they should never get involved with that drug. In private, Mike asks Lev why he involves him in his deals if he does not allow him to participate. Lev replies that he only wants him to gain experience, adding that he had promised his late mother he would always take care of him at the shop. The two then reunite with Zeke, a regular distributor who is interrupted by Jimmy, who accuses him of selling poor quality products. Zeke does not tolerate criticism. Following Lev's orders, the dealer lets Jimmy go, though not before selling him more of that defective merchandise. Returning to Adam, he makes an unexpected visit to Donna's house, his ex-wife, who definitely does not want to see him again. As they discuss their past, Adam yearns to see his son, or more precisely, to truly get to know him. Steve takes Adam to the basketball court, frequented by his son, none other than Jimmy. Adam immediately joins the game, while his son faces a guy who dwarfs him in size. The protagonist intervenes to save his son from a beating, but in the process, he takes a hit himself. At the end of the match, Jimmy asks why he did not defend himself against the other man, to which Adam replies that he prefers to avoid trouble. However, the young man warns him that he cannot show weakness in that place. That very night, Mike is visited by the only remaining member of his failed gang, Eli, who is despondent after hearing the news about the murderer of his brother. Although Mike invites him to go out for a drink, Eli already has plans with his girlfriend Lori, with whom he hopes to reconcile. Unfortunately, their arguments soon flare up again, and she storms off back to Adam's place. Meanwhile, Adam attends a self-help group where he confesses that it is his last day of probation after 16 years in prison. A long stretch, but the hope of seeing his son kept him going. Now he must prove that he can be a good father. First, he must confront his mother, Donna. His next encounter with her turns out to be as bad as the previous one, as she refuses to acknowledge him as Jimmy's father. Indeed, she has never even mentioned his existence. As he leaves the neighborhood, Adam walks down a street that brings back heart-wrenching memories. It was in that very place where he cold-bloodedly shot a young man. Meanwhile, Mike receives his first important assignment, to pick up a drug package on his own. His uncle gives him an unloaded gun for intimidation. However, Lev has entrusted him with a couple of loaded guns, in case he needs extra protection. When Mike arrives at his destination, he leaves Eli in the car and enters a notorious biker club. Mike tries to put on a smile and pressures them to show him the merchandise. The bikers take the situation lightly, tossing him the drug package and telling him to relax. After all, they are not in a mafia movie. Reluctant to be just an intermediary for his uncle, Mike suggests to Eli that they close the deal with Yamal for the heroin. Once they sell it, they can move to Austin, an ideal place for musicians without experts. Back with Adam, he meets Jimmy again in the park and shows him his drawings, his favorite pastime. Even though Jimmy admits he is not very good at drawing, Adam encourages him to keep trying. Following the advice of this stranger, Jimmy manages to create something impressive for his level. However, their interaction ends when Jimmy goes off with his friends, leaving Adam with a heavy heart. When he returns home, Donna finds Jimmy with a drawing that reminds her of someone familiar and tries to remove it, resulting in the sheet being torn and further enraging the young man. Elsewhere at the workshop, Lev encounters a dangerous mobster interested in buying weapons. One of these weapons is the same one he had given to Mike, and the other was handed to Ely, who has just left the shop. At a restaurant, Mike tries to win Lori back, making it clear that their relationship is over. He wants to stay while she cannot wait to leave for good. That same night, Adam begins his shift as a bartender. Not only does he have to deal with the customers, but also with the bar's lights, which often go out at that very moment. Mike arrives at the bar with Zeke to sell a package while waiting for his partner. Mike recognizes the bartender as the murderer of Eli's brother, while Donna apologizes to her son for their earlier fight and explains her reaction. The man who taught him to draw in the park is his father. Jimmy pales at the news. He had always longed for a father, but his mother reminds him that he was never there when they needed him. At the end of his shift, Adam is ambushed by Zeke and Mike, who confront him saying they don't want any trouble. This surprises Mike, as he remembered Adam as a fearsome assassin. Nevertheless, Adam chooses to hold back and not return blows no matter how much he is attacked. Later, Mike calls him to say that he beat up the murderer of his brother and that he needs his gun back, although something tells him that Adam won't return it the next day. Mrs. Anna walks down the street and encounters a ghost from the past. Adam, the murderer of her eldest son, who is unaware of her presence. Adam then meets with Patricia, who reveals that Donna had called her to complain about him by his real name. Thus, Patricia can do nothing but warn him to stay away from Donna, or else she might report him, which would mean a return to prison. In another scene, Mike summons the courage to confess to his uncle that he wants to leave the business. It is simply not the life he desires. Lev takes this as an insult, reminding him that he has had to carry him since the death of his sister. Meanwhile, Ellie receives an emergency call from the hospital regarding his mother's relapse. Seeing Adam seems to have been too much for her health. Later, Adam shows up in the park with the intention of playing with his son, but Jimmy already knows the truth and refuses to accept him as a father. It is too late. Afterwards, he unexpectedly visits Mike and catches him in bed with Lori, revealing that everyone is somehow interconnected. Unable to move to Austin with Ely, Mike now considers doing so with Lori, but first he needs money. He meets with Yamal behind his uncle's back and accepts his offer for heroin. A kilogram of heroin is on its way. Mike then attempts to sell it in advance to R, who inquires about Lev. With no other option, Mike reveals that his uncle does not want to get involved with that drug because his sister died from an overdose. After snapping out of his stupor, Anna confesses to Eli that she saw the murderer of her son on the street. He took her first baby and now is killing her. Tormented by these words, Eli goes to work, and his anger eventually leads to his dismissal. Meanwhile, Adam tries to reconcile with Donna by offering his sincerest apology, though he is determined to be the father he always should have been. She makes it clear that it is already too late. At least Adam manages to convince his son to see him, not without compensating him for the past. Jimmy gets straight to the point by asking why Adam abandoned him and his mother. Adam recounts that when he was young, Steve got involved with the wrong girl, and her boyfriend, along with his friends, beat him up. Steve was left in a worse state, which drove Adam to seek revenge. He took his father's gun and went to the boyfriend's neighborhood, intending only to scare them. However, the young man intervened and shot him on instinct. That young man turned out to be Eli's brother. Since then, Adam has not gone a single day without regretting his actions. The only motivation to continue has been the hope of seeing his son. Meanwhile, Mike says goodbye to Lori after a date only to be caught by Eli with a gun. Startled, Mike explains that he only wanted to comfort her because she was hurt. He never intended for it to be more than that. Upon hearing this, Ellie lowers his weapon after learning of the conversation between Jimmy and his father. Donna then calls Adam to re-establish conditions, since she cannot prevent them from meeting. She demands that he inform her about every encounter. If he complies, perhaps she will trust him again. Adam returns to work full of hope, unaware that a customer at the bar is not there for a drink but for vengeance. Meanwhile, Mike goes to the location indicated by Yamal to receive his heroin package using money borrowed from After taking the money, the dealer enters an apartment to fetch the product and completely disappears. Nervous, Mike demands answers from Yamal, who defends himself by saying that he only passes on information and has no control over the distributors. With no alternative, Mike explains his problem, then asks for time to return the money. Of course, the mobster does not take this well and gives him until dawn to fulfill his promise. Otherwise, he will cut off both of his eyes. Adam is closing the bar when he is threatened by his last customer, Ely, the brother of the boy he killed. Just then, Mike enters with the intention of robbing the place, not expecting to find his best friend there. When the lights come back on, Adam finds Ely injured next to Mike's corpse. Quickly, Adam takes the dead man's gun to defend himself against Ely, but he cannot bring himself to shoot him. Instead, he promises to tell the police that he helped defend the bar from a thief, thereby ensuring Ely's impunity for the murder of Mike. But what about his own vengeance? The next day, Ely goes out to buy medicine for his wound, while the city learns of the previous night's robbery, in which Adam and Mike died in the name of their nephew. Lev then assaults Air's club and finishes him off with gunfire with the help of Zeke. Meanwhile, Jimmy receives his father's drawing notebook from Steve. Through it, he discovers that his father had recently drawn both him and his mother. Lev and Zeke are arrested for the murder of while Ellie stays by his mother's side in the hospital, and Lori leaves for Austin alone, the death of her father still weighing on her conscience. Jimmy begins to draw in his notebook, ready to open a new chapter.